Happy Friday, and welcome here to another edition of Husker Online Headlines. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Husker Online Headlines, brought to you by our title sponsor, StayHome.Care. They are there for the loved ones in your life to help you with simple tasks. Maybe you can't always be there for. Could be cooking, cleaning, giving a ride for grocery shopping, to a doctor's appointment. They are there to provide those great services to you, and it's never too early to call StayHome.Care. Call them at 402-205-2233. You might have a friend, a family member that could need this service down the road, and you just have questions about it. So give them a call again at 402-205-2233. Thanks to our title sponsor, StayHome.Care. Okay, let's get into it. We got a great show. We are going to be joined later in the show by former Nebraska Athletic Director Bill Moos. But before we get to Bill, let's go into headline number one. Let's size up Matt Rhule's roadmap ahead. The Huskers are wrapping up recruiting on the road for the rest of January. So we still have a good 2 weeks or so of recruiting. The players got back on campus. They began classes this week. Winter workouts began. A roster update was made. And not a lot of real earth-shaking moves. I mean, many of the removals from the roster were players that walked at senior day. Probably the most notable removal of the roster was wide receiver Alex Bullock, but he did walk at senior day. So on that note, it's not too far out. Then fullback Barrett Liebentritt was another removal from the roster, but then some walk-on players. Nebraska right now today is at 132 players listed on that active roster. They've got to get down to 105 players by the summer.
Remarkable time. Now, a couple of things. So there was 12 removals, right?
Technically, I already had some of those removed. I mean, like some of these players, like Joey Mancino and Grant Buda, they had already said that they were done.
Okay.
But they could have come back.
Yeah.
So some of those are always hard to confirm. And Alex Bullock, you didn't know for sure if he was going to come back or not. His brother did the same thing, but he has been removed from the roster. So 132 players.
132. Now, what one bit of perspective we can add to this conversation is, Sean, this is not happening all over the country because most programs don't have 132 players. Nebraska is, I would describe Nebraska as a rarity. Not everybody's going through that.
Well, and here's the other thing that's unique is most of these removals are going to be local players.
Yeah.
And when you have a state of under 2 million people that only has about 60 Class A and Class B high schools, a lot of people feel a connection because our state is so small. So when you see, a kid from this school or that school gets removed, you automatically feel the connection as a Nebraskan to some of these kids.
Right. And I hope people understand this is circumstantial. This is a mandatory 105 that schools have to go to. Not all schools will carry 105, right?
No, I mean, most will, but I think the question is how many will you do? Some schools will still do 85 scholarships. A lot will do 95 and have just 10 traditional walk-ons. But you could technically do 105 full-fledged scholarship guys. I mean, there is no rule on that now.
Is that what Nebraska's doing?
They haven't committed publicly. I mean,
okay.
There's over 100 players right now, though, that would be labeled scholarship. If you went through and head counted the roster, it's over 100, I'd say, that are scholarship worthy or scholarship level recruited players that came here. So, yeah, I don't know the accounting on that and what Nebraska's plan is going to be. And the Big Ten, some leagues might mandate that. You can have 105, but as a league, we're going to mandate 95 scholarships. You might see that out there for some different conferences and how they go about this.
I'm sure that when people listen, we're doing our best here to lay out what this new world looks like. But I'm sure there's a lot of people are confused. I guarantee you there's some people that they're still kind of confused by what's going on. What does a scholarship mean anymore? If a kid's getting $20,000 a month of NIL rev share money, then what's a scholarship mean?
Well, you still want
that mean?
That paid for too.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Do you see where I'm coming from?
But yeah, we've almost gotten to the point where, okay, we're paying you this much rev share. You need to pay, but you need to pay for your scholarship out of this money. But that's not going to happen. I mean, you will still get the old scholarship benefits as before, plus this money.
Okay, now thank you, Sean, because you just made something make sense to me. It's informative because you would say there are multiple players making at least $20,000 a month, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, there are multiple players. There are multiple players on this roster probably making over $1 million.
Right, and they still get their scholarship. That seems kind of now. I'm not casting aspersions on anybody. It just seems kind of silly to me.
Yeah, you come in as a high-profile NIL transfer, and you're making more money already than the chancellor.
It's really interesting. And there are lower profile players on the team that are getting $15,000 a month, right?
Well, some of I mean, 10, 15,000, you know, the payouts will vary how this is going to be done. And I don't know how public they'll ever have to make this. One would think, though, in a university public records world, some of this should be public. And
it's interesting, isn't it, Sean?
Everything else is public.
Right. We used to publish salaries in the newspaper. The World Herald does the same thing. But we kind of limit it to people that are making six figures. Well, these are players that are making six figures.
Well, there's a big like PDF file that comes out every July, the full budget, and it lists every salary at Nebraska from the custodians to the athletic director.
And a lot of those would be published in the newspaper I don't know if they still do it. We used to, though, but it was athletic department employees that were making a certain amount of money. So anyway,
and I've had people tell me at a place like Nebraska, that stuff got publicized more than any other place they've ever been. It was kind of bizarre,
right?
Like you're like a part-time or you're a recruiting staff member,
right?
Your salary's published,
and then there's your name in the paper with your salary. Yeah, it was odd. It is. Now, again, getting back to our conversation. So that's, Matt Rhule's got to make, wouldn't you call a lot of these tough decisions?
I'd say so. And I think the tough decisions could be with some scholarship players, because I do think there'll be some walk-ons in the program that have earned a spot, and those guys will stay. And then that means people that you brought in on a scholarship might be the ones that are forced to leave.
Right. So and we have to be sensitive, I think, to Matt Rhule's plight here. It's not easy. He's got to tell guys to go. Not all of them. Some of it will be natural. There'll be some natural attrition. Some guys will decide on their own to go. But I imagine there's some that don't really want to leave that will have to, right?
Well, because it's going to be hard to find an equal place to Nebraska in terms of the amenities and the resources that you get here.
Yeah. 100, Sean. I mean, these players are taken care of at an exceptionally high level. Just think of, Sean, the world they're in. Do you ever think about this? That they have a place to go where they're clothed, fed, their medical needs are all taken care of. Everything's taken care of. They go to this safe spot in the world where everything is taken care of.
I mean, they operate out of a Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah. And oh, by the way, they're making a lot of money, like a lot of money, So yes, I can see why a lot of kids don't want to leave.
I mean, when you put some of these things in context, you have players on the football team that will make more money than John Cook.
They'll make more money than John Cook, and they get this lifestyle for a period of a few years where it's sort of idyllic. Like, it's amazing that they'll never have again, maybe, Oh,
and there'll be studies and 20-year look backs of just how mismanaged this money was for kids. I mean, because look, there are grown-ups that couldn't handle it, obviously, professionals that can't handle it, let alone a 19, 18-year-old kid
who all of a sudden looks at his checking account and there's $40,000 in there. It's really interesting, isn't it?
And you don't have tuition bills.
Right.
You don't have food bills.
Right.
You don't have real clothing bills.
Yeah.
So what do you can get in a lot of trouble with that money. But I do want to transition in this discussion to spring football. We don't know any details yet as far as, we presume they would start practice around March 24th. That's the week after spring break. But still no word on like a red-white spring game. And in general, I think around college athletics, we're not seeing the announcement necessarily of spring games.
Because?
Well, I think with roster sizes and And the other thing in my mind is, like, if you're paying guys hundreds of thousands of dollars, or in some cases over $1 million, do you want to go through a full spring game and injure that guy? Because you still have to pay him.
Okay, so back up a little bit. You wrote this in Tunnel Talk today, and you're exactly right. What you're getting at here is the possibility of spring games going away. And a lot of it is because, and you've covered this because you've been covering it 20 years. I've been covering it longer than that. Nebraska, for a long time, operated with, they could have 3 units of big men, of linemen. You literally had a third team that you could put out there, and it was representable. Those days it's harder to do now.
Because
it might be for some teams impossible.
And with injuries and graduation, once you go to 105, you might only have 70 players for the spring available.
Exactly. So you don't have, and where it's impacted is the line more than anything. You got to field a full lines. It's hard to do.
But then the other argument is the revenue. Nebraska's an outlier where they can make over $1 million on a spring game. And if I told you, hey, Sip, we're taking away $1 million from your budget, I mean, that's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
So what, like Troy Dannon, like what will his outlook be?
Now, hold on. Is that a big deal?
It's $1 million.
Uh-huh.
I would imagine in that ballpark.
Their revenue was $220 million.
And there's some economic boom and impact. But yeah, you could argue it back. The increase you make off that television deal annually is significant.
Yeah. So, no, you're right. I understand. It's not a small conversation. But I think what you're getting at here is what you're getting at here is the possibility of no spring game this year?
I mean, I don't want to say this year, but down the road, I think we're heading in that model.
Okay.
Where maybe there would be something open to the fans, but it'd be like a 15th practice. You just go and watch, which wouldn't be the same.
Interesting. Yeah. It's not. It's just this is the evolution of college football, and there are elements of it that are changing. That at a place like Nebraska, we are it's ingrained in the fabric of our life that there's a spring game. And that there'll be a spring game, and the stadium will have a lot of people, and we'll watch something that resembles a game. Don't count on that being a part of the fabric of your life too much longer is what I would say.
You know, and the date that I thought the spring game will or would be on this year would be April 26th. If I had to guess a day, that's my guess. And I'm already worried about that day. I'm like, well, that's Carly's first communion. The Cheetahs will have a soccer game that day in the spring. It will be a busy Saturday.
Yeah, maybe we just start calling it the spring day.
The spring day.
No, that's not good. I would make a horrible marketing person. Maybe just keep calling it the spring game, even though it's not a game.
I still think you do something no matter what this all goes to.
Yeah.
You have to do something.
Yeah.
To give people access.
I agree. That's challenging for the head coach. Because you got to come up with something that's halfway entertaining, halfway meaningful, that'll help the team, but also be a nice show for the fans. That's easier said than done.
Well, and even the Big Ten Network, they'll want spring games still.
I know, but they may not get them.
The content.
I know, they may not get them.
Yeah, and that could come down the road. All right.
What else on that? What else is happening over there? The mat drills.
We're still a week or two away from that stuff.
Yeah.
You don't get into the mat drills right away. So this is week 1 of workouts. I mean, they've just kind of gotten back in the swing of it, and the coaches are all gone. And so what mat drills, they begin once recruiting's done, because the coaching staff is at every mat drill.
And we always do this thing with the term mat drill. What are mat drills?
High intensity boot camp drills.
Thank you, Sean.
Basically designed to get you to quit.
Sounds
like your workout at Planet Fitness. When I call you, I'm like, what are you doing? Doing the elliptical.
I'm punishing myself is what I'm doing. But anyway, I think people are interested. Sean, I'm always interested. Like, what's the team doing? So thank you. That's what they're doing.
All right, let's take it to headline number 2. Before we get to former Nebraska athletic director Bill Moos, HuskerOnline headlines again brought to you by our title sponsor, StayHome.Care. They're there for the loved ones in your life. It's never too early to call them at 402-205-2233 to learn all about the services they can provide for you and your family or your friends. We're also brought to you by BetterHelp. And look, it's January. Life is stressful. You got a lot on your plate. The weather's crummy. Sometimes you just need someone to talk to get it off your chest. and BetterHelp is there for you. And they've got a great survey system online. You fill it out, and you find the right match. And the best part about it is you do it from the comfort of your home. You'll meet with a therapist, whether it's on your phone, on FaceTime, or on your computer. BetterHelp is there to find you and find it on your time that works for you. And we've got a great special. If you've never tried BetterHelp, we're going to give you 10% off your first month. Visit betterhelp.com/Husker. Again, that's betterhelp.com/Husker to get 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. All right, Sip, let's do the honors of bringing in a very special guest to HuskerOnline Headlines. Let's welcome in former Nebraska Athletic Director Bill Moos, who is in his barn in Washington, I understand, right, Bill?
I am. I'm in the barn.
Well, Bill,
what a beautiful barn.
Well, this is a 6,000 square foot barn that I literally designed when I was bored at Pac-12 meetings, when I was still in the Pac-12, and it turned out pretty good. There's never been an animal in this barn, but there is a full basketball court and a fly fishing room, and this room here where it's kind of my hangout.
All right.
Well, Bill, you've obviously been retired, but you've been busy, and you've got a book project going on right now, and you've had an illustrious career between Oregon, Washington State, Nebraska. You played obviously at a high level. Give us an idea. What can we expect in this book? When will it be out? And how fun has it been to kind of maybe relive some of these stories from the past?
Well, it's been a lot of fun, and it's been therapeutic, Sean. I actually been compiling materials for this book. It's a memoir, and it traces my life from a young boy in a one-horse town on a wheat and cattle ranch, 4-room country schoolhouse, all that. People in Nebraska know that whole deal. And learned to play 8-man flag football on an alfalfa field, and developed a dream of one day playing major college football. And through a lot of challenges and so forth, I got to live that dream, and that was kind of the foundation for my professional career. So it's got inspiration, motivation, determination, and triumphs and tragedies I think people can relate to, and also all in the with the backdrop of all the changes in the college game. I think I was telling Sip a month or so ago, it dawned on me that I was a part of college football in the 100th anniversary of the college football game, and was still involved with it at the 150th anniversary. So I've seen a lot. I've been listening in before I came on, and some of the things you're talking about, I never would have dreamt would be happening when I first got into it in 1969. So it's been a lot of fun, and I actually started writing the content of this book and working on the manuscript during COVID, when I was living in Lincoln, coming into Memorial Stadium and in my office there. And out of 350 employees, there may have been administratively 15 of us in that building. But I made sure I was there every day. I thought that was important. We did a lot of Zoom meetings, but I also took time in between those meetings and such to put my templates together and really start the manuscript. And it's been a lot of fun.
Bill, you're an AD at Montana, Washington State, Oregon, and Nebraska. There's a lot of material to cover in a book. How prominent is Nebraska in this book? What's the feel of those chapters?
I have 2 chapters about my time at Nebraska. And, I think people know this, but I will reiterate my career. I was fortunate enough to, I thought, finish my career in 2010, where I started it as a 18-year-old college football player in 1969. So not many people get to do that. And we had built our ranch. We were having grandkids. Our older son was on the staff at Arizona State. He had played there, was an all Pac-12 defensive tackle. Our youngest son had just gone to Cal, Berkeley, on a full scholarship as a tight end, later moved to outside linebacker. So we had everything. We had our boat right at Lake Coeur d'Alene, just gorgeous, 30 minutes from our ranch. Life was good. But the Nebraska thing opened, as you know, when Sean Eichhorst left in October of 2017.
Mm-hmm.
I was 66 years old, almost 67.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at my wife, Kendra, and she and we've stepped into every one of these adventures all through our professional career. And I said, you know what, honey, I that's one of the iconic brands in the industry that we're in. And I'm going to take a run at it. And lo and behold, I got the job. And now what do? I had to leave home, sell the herd, lock up the barn that I'm sitting in right now. And what a great adventures as we journeyed into the great state of Nebraska. And it was an interesting 4 years. So much happened at the University of Nebraska, the state of Nebraska, and the state of college athletics, and especially football. And of course, the coronavirus, the COVID whole shutdown. It's worthy of 2 chapters in my book, because it wasn't what any of us signed up for when we got into this business, and only the really tough survived. And I got lots of examples of some of the great ADs and chancellors and presidents that got that done.
How would you characterize these chapters on Nebraska? Is it, without giving it all away, you don't want to give your book away now, but what should we look for?
One of the chapters is entitled "There Is No Place Like Nebraska," and we all know the song, and it's true. There is no place like that. I love the people. As I mentioned just a few minutes ago, I was raised on a wheat and cattle ranch, small town. I loved getting out with them, and I think they were starved for that when I came in. And I told Hank Bounds and Ronnie Green, hey, I'm going to hit all those towns. That's where I feel at home. And if the scoreboard isn't reading right in the early days, we can talk about John Deere tractors, the Angus cattle, and the price of soybeans, and have a piece of pie and a cup of coffee or what have you, and fit in. And that was so much fun. I did 310 public appearances in my first 20 months.
Wow.
And it was a blast. And you don't catch flights to Valentine and North Platte and up into the sand hills. You got to get in the car and drive, and how fun that was too. And many times I had my wife Kendra with me, and we got to explore and really get to know these people. And the one thing, and I put in my book, that was so touching was, Nebraskans are very humble people. They're very loyal people. They're football fanatics. I love that. That's been my life. But they're also extremely, they're very, I guess I would say, patriotic, very patriotic, and great philanthropy. Some of the events we do that would raise a couple $1 million for cancer research, and everybody pitching in and being involved. It was just a very heartwarming experience for us. And of course, when it got into the COVID period, very, very challenging. And I can get into detail on that, but I do in the book.
Okay.
I don't think people realize that we risked that when that COVID epidemic and the virus and all that, and we were all getting vaccinated and all this, but we were risking losing $100 million in a fiscal year in Nebraska athletics. And that would have been a pretty good hit. And we were able, through a lot of behind the scenes and lobbying and sometimes threats and everything else, able to mitigate that down to below 20 million. And that in itself is maybe one of my accomplishments that I'm most proud of in all my years as a Division I AD.
Bill, I want to go back to that time because there was multiple schedules released that year, and I know you were really involved in putting together the schedule that we thought was going to be the schedule that was well thought out, well laid out. It made a lot of sense. And then just one day they pulled the plug about a week later, and they said they weren't going to play football. And, Kevin Warren said this will not be revisited. And at that point, I think we're all like, whoa, what's going to go on here? And how did they get football back? When you think back to that time, like what was it Nebraska taking the Big Ten to court and some of these other things that, what was the thing that got it back to where you guys were able to play that year, even though it was really in November almost when the season started?
Well, I always, through all of this, felt I needed to represent Nebraska. Nebraska needs football, and football needs Nebraska. And it's a way of life. We all know the stories of generations of season tickets handed down. When I hired Scott Frost, that spring game, I heard you guys talk about spring ball. That spring game in 2018, we had 90,000 people for a spring game.
Yeah.
I mean, my heavens. And I went to bat for Nebraska. And when it came down to a lot of arguments, we were on 2 to 3 hour Zoom calls every single morning.
Boy.
Oh, for months and months. And there were tense moments, and there were words that probably aren't in the Book of Mormon that were exchanged, and it wasn't always pleasant. But when we started messing with the schedule, and as our fans remember, there was nobody in the stadium. We played college football in an empty stadium.
Strange.
And so many things had to be adjusted along the lines there just to get, just a couple of games. And that schedule was changed 3 times. We ended up on the 3rd schedule, which I didn't like that one either because, we were playing Penn State. We had pretty tough crossovers when we had the 2 divisions, as it turned out. But we did get some football. And, yes, it helped our budget. But while we were struggling in empty stadiums and all of the politics that were going on, the SEC was filling stadiums and playing regular football.
Mm-hmm.
And I really cover this very, very much in detail, that the struggles at Nebraska, the struggles in the Big Ten. We had a brand new commissioner who had never been involved in college athletic administration, and it was a learning curve for him as well, and the medical pieces and the presidents and chancellors. And hey, I along with my father being a farmer and rancher, who was also a politician, state legislator and all that. And I learned the politics from him as well as I learned football from my college coaches. So I think I was effective for the Huskers during those 4 years, especially on that stage.
Bill, you're in the process of writing this book, and you're writing it. You're not having a ghost writer. This isn't somebody writing it for you. This is Bill Moos sitting and writing his own book, right?
5:30 every morning right here in this barn. And you're right. There is no ghostwriter. Every word I've written, I've got a whole back room here with very organized tubs of every one of my stops. All of your great columns, Sip, are in those tubs. I've been laughing as I'm going through them. We did have a lot of fun, but also, World Herald and all through. I mean, Washington, Oregon, Montana, USA Today, Sports Illustrated. I've got all those that applied to my days. But I have a great editor, a best-selling author, a little older than me, lives in Las Vegas. But he takes care of the punctuation and maybe correcting some run-on sentences, but no content. This is my book, and I'm excited about it. And you get to be our age or my age. You guys are younger, but you want to have something to hand down through the generations in the family too. And we were all involved. I call Kendra and I and the Moosketeers, our 5 kids that we uprooted in this industry you do, and had to move them to different towns, different schools. But hey, they were at a lot of bowl games and a lot of Final Fours and all that too. It was a family adventure. And I really highlight that along the way as well.
Bill, as we wrap it up here, I was thinking about this. Your final month at Nebraska was a month before NIL started. I mean, when you think back, you got out probably at the right time as kind of a traditionalist, but how hard are these jobs now for the athletic directors trying to manage this revenue share dollar money along with collectives and all this money that you seemingly have to find? And if you're not in the Big Ten or the SEC, it's not necessarily going to be there for a lot of these schools.
Well, again, you guys know me a lot better probably than the listeners and those that are tuned in. But I spent a lifetime in this career pushing for parity, where finally we got to see equal revenue sharing on these huge TV contracts. I was the architect of getting that done in the Pac-12. And so all of a sudden you see a Washington State go to a Rose Bowl. You see Northwestern and Purdue go to Rose Bowl. It's going to be pretty hard to ever see that again. And you saw Drew Brees and the Drew Bledsoes and these guys being those high draft choices and all that. Probably not going to see that anymore because, unfortunately, it's all about the individual now. And I stayed in here and I've talked, I know to SIP many times. The thing I savored the most in my 4 years when I was a college football player, student athlete, was the opportunity to get that education and the camaraderie of my teammates. When I put my hand down on 3rd and short inside the 20, I wasn't fighting so much for Bill Moos as I was my teammate next to me and the school that I loved. When you reach down and find just a little bit more, and I'm not sure that's there anymore. And I fought for student athlete welfare, nutrition, the psychologists, the strength and conditioning, all the big Adidas and Nike deals, all of that. I wanted them to have a chance to meet their potential. That was the whole thing. And so, hey, okay, when I was a kid playing football over 50 years ago, you went home in the summer, hauled hay and harvested wheat and maybe have $400 in my pocket. Couldn't do it anymore because it's a 12-month deal. So that's when, hey, all right, let's go with the cost of attendance piece. Because this kid needs to, go to a movie and maybe get a steak dinner once. So I was okay with that. But when it started to get to the money piece and the paychecks, the NIL, any sign of parity went down the drain. And then with the conference realignment, what do you got to think about? One day you wake up and USC and UCLA is gone from the Pac-12. No, nobody knew. And then boom, there goes Washington and Oregon. What are we teaching these young people? Deceit, dishonesty, all these things. That's what they're seeing, along with their coaches being paid $10 to $20 million. It's out of hand. And that train has left the station. And I don't know if it's ever going to be able to be slowed down. There's no control of it. I was so interested. I think Sean was saying it, and Sip, you were adding in. Where's the value of the scholarship? Way back, and I was still at Oregon, we took the pencil out. Greg Byrne, who I gave him his first job at Oregon. He's now, of course, the AD at Alabama. But we took our pencil down, sat down, and this was in 2006 or so. And we penciled out that a out-of-state football player, for example, on a full ride out of state, when you added everything up, tuition, fees, board and room at campus rates, books, you get into what's the value of a personal trainer, of all of the shoes and apparel, of the nutrition, 3 square meals. Now, I'm telling you, this adds up. Well, it was over $200,000 value. Pretty good gig in those days for a 20-year-old. And I, for one, believe it still would be a good gig. And the other thing that you're going to see in my book, and I want to point out, the biggest thing you want to steer clear of, and in college athletics or anything, is a divided locker room. A divided locker room will show on the scoreboard. I don't care. And I believe that within, I had 350 employees at Nebraska. That was my locker room. I made sure every one of them got full use of the training table. Not somebody got to have lunch and others didn't. No way. Everybody got Adidas. We brought that locker room together. And all of my team's locker rooms were together because they all were getting the same thing. But I'm sitting in a football locker room right now, and I'm a left guard, and I'm looking at that quarterback. I'm thinking, hey, there's a divided locker room here. I don't care what you say. And life, really, at the end of the day, we're trying to teach these young men and women a couple lessons about what's coming down the line. And when it's all about me and it's not about us, you're gonna run into some problems later on.
Well, Bill, we appreciate it. We could have you on and just do a show every week with you if you want. I mean,
hey, I'm right here.
We just got through chapter 1, so we got a lot more ground to
It's
cover.
not like I got an appointment here, Sean, in 15 minutes.
You got to write though. You got to get busy writing.
I'm pounding on this keyboard.
It's not easy, is it?
No, but it is a lot of fun, and a lot of respect for you guys who have been doing it all your professional careers. And let me say, I miss you guys. I miss the people in Nebraska. Go Big Red. Wonderful place.
Thank you,
miss
Bill.
You too, Bill. Thanks. Hey, this was nice of you to take time. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, thanks again to former Nebraska Athletic Director Bill Moos. And before we get into headline number 3, HuskerOnline headlines brought to you by Sipple's favorite product, Mando.
It's a good product.
If you've not tried Mando, we've got a lot of chatter with Mando on the HuskerOnline message boards with their 72-hour. Is it 72 hours? You can.
I must be. I mean, what I've really been drawn to now is the lotion, like the Mando that you put on your, you spread it on your body. It's makes your clothes smell good. They have a good product, Sean.
And you can get the Mando starter pack. So you'll get a stick of deodorant and then a cream tube or a spray deodorant. It's 4 products total.
The spray is my second favorite thing.
And 4 products total of the Mando in this starter pack. And it's already marked down to $40. We're going to take it down $5 more with the promo code Husker at shopmando.com. So that's $35. You'll get 4 products, and to put it in perspective, a stick of deodorant at Target or Walmart, where you can buy Mando or online, is over $15. So you're going to get 4 products for $35, free shipping as well. And you pick the ones you want. I like the pure sport kind. That's my, what kind did you have?
Pure sport. That's what,
because you're a high level athlete,
very high level.
But go to shopmando.com, promo code Husker. Thanks to Mando. And boy, that was a lot of fun to have Bill on as we go headline 3, Bill Moos reaction, because there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, you could almost do a 2-hour show going through some of the things like with COVID and
Yeah, and you know what? Yeah, that was a rough period that Bill oversaw, trying to steering Nebraska through COVID. There was a lot to that. I mean, he mentioned that they could have lost what did he say, $100 million? I mean, it was a very tense time. I don't think he had to enact a lot of staff cuts, but that was a tough time. The other thing that's interesting about that conversation, now, Bill, you put it very well, Sean. Bill is very much a traditionalist, and what's going on now in the college game is hard for a traditionalist to watch. Some people, I'm sure, will listen to guys like me and guys like Bill and roll their eyes and say, oh, come on now. The locker room's not necessarily divided. I don't know. It's hard to say for sure, but he's definitely coming from a traditionalist bent, like you said.
Think about where it's come from, like just a simple thing. Like guys could probably barely afford a car to put gas in their car. And now you have guys driving $100,000 cars.
Well, I think about D'Angelo Evans. I think I've told this story to you before. I knew D'Angelo pretty well when he was here. Got to know him, liked him a lot. He's a great running back from Wichita. Remember?
5-star level recruit. High. Oh, heck yeah. I remember D'Angelo Evans.
Of course you do. D'Angelo one time told me, I said, what are you doing this weekend? He goes, well, I'd like to go visit my girlfriend in Wichita, but my car won't make it. I'm like, really? Because even back then you'd hear stories like SIP, they're paying for guys' cars. I'm like, I'm here to tell you they're not, because now maybe somebody got something, but D'Angelo Evans, the 5-star running back from Wichita, he couldn't make it home to see his girlfriend and he had a jalopy. I knew what he drove. He couldn't make it down there. That wouldn't be a problem now for D'Angelo Evans, because what would he get into his account right now? What would you guess? A 5-star running back.
He'd probably be making $400,000 or $500,000 a year.
Right. He'd have plenty for a car, right? He wouldn't have to worry about getting down to Wichita.
Well, and like now, I mean, the money, guys travel. I think with the NIL money, kids travel more. I mean, there was the one weekend where Micah Mazuka didn't get to travel to Purdue for whatever odd reason, and Nebraska was leaving that Friday, and a group of media members saw Micah Mazuka on that same Friday the team was leaving, getting on a plane to go to San Francisco.
He can.
I mean,
I think Dylan Raiola, I mean, come on. Dylan can do about whatever he wants,
it's a different time.
There's Dylan.
And, Bill's final month was really the month before NIL started. It started in July, and Bill was finished at Nebraska in June of that year.
Now, Bill, again, writing a book, he didn't shed a lot of light. I wouldn't expect him to.
He's not going to give away the whole story.
No, he's not going to give away his book. I mean, but he's in the midst of writing it. And I know what I've talked to him enough in the last several months. Some of it will be funny. He's got a great sense of humor. He's told me some funny stories that are going to be in the book. There'll be some reality in there. There's going to be some reality. And I would tell people it's going to be newsworthy here. There'll be some.
We got to get him back. Maybe he'll do a signing somewhere for the book.
It would be great if he did. But when that book comes out, it'll be newsworthy here. And I'll just tease it that way. It'll be newsworthy. It's interesting. Just some of the stuff that he's going to lay out that happened at Nebraska.
All right. Well, that was fun. Thanks again to Bill Moos.
And it's nice to have a voice like that, isn't it?
Oh yeah. It brought back a lot of memories, and the job that he had over that period of time with COVID.
Rough.
I mean,
Sean, you covered it.
We were inches away from not having football.
That does not sit well
and
with
I'll
you.
never
That does not sit well with you.
Are you?
No. Or Bill Moos. Trust me. Bill has talked to me about those calls. He was pretty diplomatic about it and discussing it with us. Those were rugged calls with Warren, the commissioner at the time. I mean rugged. Like, oh God, it
was almost politically, I shouldn't say almost, but it was politically charged at that time as a pivotal period in election around the corner. There was a lot going on in the world at that time. And the SEC and the Big 12 used common sense. They figured out a way to do it, even allow like smaller number. Like that was the part I never understood. Why? Okay. Memorial Stadium held our 90,000 people. Why couldn't 25,000 be allowed in?
I don't know. I just remember distinctly and I remember calling you that day when the Big Ten wasn't playing. The Big Ten started in October, right? They started their season in October. I remember distinctly, I would go to the office on, the first week of September and I was watching SEC games, including a game at Kyle Field at Texas A&M where the stadium was essentially full. And I'd be like, okay, now wait a second. In College Station, Texas, they're playing football in early September in basically a full stadium. Probably wasn't supposed to be, but it was. And I'm sitting in my office. We're not going to be covering any games until October. It was confusing to people, and I could see why.
I'll never forget in September.
Terrible commissioner.
The weather, and he's a terrible owner of the Bears or whatever.
Well, I don't know about that.
Yeah, he is.
I like their hire. I like that Ben.
I don't think he's very well respected, though.
I know your opinions on.
He could have hired Jim Harbaugh and didn't want to hire him because he had obviously history on those conference calls with Harbaugh.
I guarantee you that was a non-starter.
No,
I don't. Okay, this is where there's danger of getting out over our skis here. I don't know that Harbaugh would work for Kevin Warren.
No, I don't think he would either.
Yeah.
And I mean, those calls got ugly with the coaches too.
Oh, 100.
I mean, I think there were separate calls with coaches and ADs that were at that time. And I've talked to somebody from Nebraska that was on the coaches' calls, and they were not pretty.
No, we're not. We wouldn't come on this show and talk about stuff we don't know for sure when it comes to this. I've had enough discussions with people. Yeah, those are exceedingly tense calls.
I'll just never forget those September Saturdays. It was absolutely gorgeous weather.
Yeah.
And football hadn't been brought back yet. So we didn't, and I'm just walking around.
Yeah.
And it's gorgeous out. And COVID hadn't even really hit yet either. I mean, there weren't a lot of cases. We're walking around. It's like, how can they not play football right now?
And they're playing it. The issue is they're playing it elsewhere. That's the thing. So, yeah. And in the back of your mind, and you know this, and I know this because I remember distinctly getting a call from a Nebraska official one Saturday saying, I don't think we're playing. I don't think we're playing this year. And I can remember being in my side yard wondering, okay, then if you're not playing, I was thinking about the newspaper at the time, and you're thinking about your entity and now the entity I'm on. What are we going to do exactly? I mean, how's this going to work?
Because they sent the players home for about a month. I mean, there was kind of about a month.
That's right. I forgot about that.
And that's actually when the most cases of COVID happened within the football program, was when they were out of the infrastructure.
It didn't make a lot of sense.
No. And then the Big Ten obviously forced the daily testing policies, and even on game day or the day before the game, they were testing twice.
Right.
And they stuck that bill to the schools, millions of extra dollars. Nowhere in the world, nowhere was testing their people as much as Big Ten football players had to be tested. They were being tested 6-7 times a week.
Yep. I just don't think people understand all that it entails.
Look at Frost. That almost looks fake.
No, that's Frost. Interesting. I walked by Bill at the Ohio State game that year. I didn't even recognize him. He had a mask on. I had a mask on, and I didn't even know it was him until later.
I remember like Frost had his mask down, and like Pat 40 chastised him on Twitter for not having his mask up. It's like, what world are we living in?
I think we should go to the next headline
before we get in trouble.
Right.
As Jim Walden once said, the last 10 minutes of the press conference can end up being the worst for you. So we better
that gets you every time.
Osborne always went to the Jim Walden line. All right. Before we go to headline number 4 again, we're brought to you by our title sponsor, StayHome.Care. They're there for you to help the loved ones in your lives, friends, family. Simple tasks: getting a ride to a doctor's appointment, coming over to cook, clean, laundry. They do all the things you need, picking up prescriptions. 402-205-2233. It's never too early to call to learn more about the services they offer at StayHome.Care. Thank you again to StayHome.Care for sponsoring us here on Husker on the Headlines. All right, headline 4. Some sad news this week. Husker football lost one of its own. Former Nebraska running back and great Calvin Jones passed away at the age of 54. And, the cause of death not known yet, but very, very sad news. When you think about Calvin Jones, he finished his career, Sip, as the number 2 all-time leading rusher when he was done, only behind Mike Rozier. he still, I believe, is ranked 7th in the all-time rushing list at Nebraska. So one of the greatest running backs in program history, and finished his career right behind Rozier, and obviously was passed by Amir and Rex and Amon Green and some other great running backs. But one of the top 10 running backs in program history, Calvin Jones, passes away at the age of 54.
Yeah, and it's too early. It's interesting. I'll tell you this. Stu Pospisil very well, right? For the Omaha World Herald, he's been a writer for a long time. He wrote a beautiful obit on Calvin Jones, and he did say this, that the cause of death was likely carbon monoxide poisoning, and that's according to a retired Central coach named Joe DeSotko.
Joe. I actually saw Joe this week. She's the former Omaha Central track coach.
Okay.
So she coached all those guys in track and field, and
Joe helped raise Calvin. She helped raise him.
Joe goes to all the Nebraska basketball games, so you've probably met Joe, and she's involved heavily in the Outland Trophy and the other things too.
So what happened is the furnace in Calvin's home went out, and Jones was using a generator in the basement. This is a
gas generator.
Yeah, this is as reported by Stu in the World Herald. And again, he gets into Joe helping raise Calvin with a woman named Rita Ryan, who was a Latin teacher. And Jones was quoted one time saying, "For me not to be one of their own sons, to show me the love and support they did was tremendous." He said they both come to North Omaha, pick me up at 6:30 in the morning to make sure I'd get to school. He said, I wouldn't have made it and gone on to the University of Nebraska without that. Also, for much of his childhood, his maternal grandparents looked after him. So Calvin, he wasn't raised conventionally like we think about it. But he came here, and what I remember about Calvin was what an explosive speed, but also what a genuinely nice, sort of gentle soul he was. Not all football players are like that, but he was such a you'd never know he was a star running back by just talking to him.
44 is what he wore, right?
Yeah, number 40,
which was a unique number for a running back.
Cool number.
You didn't see 44 too often.
No, you did not. Certainly not Nebraska. I think Chuck Foreman, maybe please fact check this, somebody. But I think Chuck Foreman of the type that in, Sean. Chuck Foreman of the Minnesota Vikings.
He wore 44.
Yeah, so it was a cool number. Now you have to be a certain age to remember Chuck Foreman. But now that we're talking about it, you know what? I wonder if Calvin wore it because of Chuck Foreman. And the reason I say that is, you know what Chuck Foreman was, Sean? He was a slasher. He was a slashing running back. Big, fast slasher, run between the tackles. And Calvin was like that. I mean, he was I'm going to say Calvin went about 6'2", 210. He was a bigger running back.
And on that, in that 1993 team, he was the main guy, but then Lawrence Phillips came on, and
right.
Lawrence really came on, and I mean they had a big backfield though. Tommy Frazier, Lawrence Phillips, Calvin Jones, Jeff Makovica, and I'm looking at the Orange Bowl box score. Damon Benning took 5 carries in that Orange Bowl.
Okay, so that was a big part of it. But what people are probably right now of a certain age, Nebraska fans of a certain age, are saying you have to mention his Calvin Jones. Sean, you remember this, ran for 294 yards and 6 touchdowns against Kansas in 1990.
3 quarters, pretty much.
Yeah. He ripped off 294 and 6 touchdowns as a backup. I mean, he was a backup. In fact, you remember William Reed? Don't you do?
Omaha Central coach.
Yeah, good job. You know everybody, Sean. In Stu's obit, Stu Pospisil's obit, he talks how William Reed heard from Jones before and after the game. He heard from Jones before because Jones learned that Derek Brown was starting ahead of him against Kansas and felt that it should have been the other way around. And then after the game, Jones called William Reed and said, "Did I show him? Did I show him?" And Williams said, yes, you did. So it was.
And that record stood until Roy Halou broke it
Is that right?
in the 2010 season.
Okay.
Missouri game.
Did he get to 300?
Roy Halou broke 300.
Yeah.
I mean,
God, in one afternoon.
That was a top 10 matchup. I mean, Missouri was really good. If you remember that Tiger team,
Sure,
I
remember that afternoon pretty well. Actually, Blaine Gabbert was the starting quarterback for Missouri, right?
And Nebraska has had Missouri on their heels that whole game.
It's a great win for Nebraska. It was. It was one of. Wasn't it? Wouldn't you say that was one of Bo's better wins?
That I would always say. The Oklahoma State win in Stillwater, because that was a really good Oklahoma State team.
That's right, and that's when Taylor threw for a zillion yards that day, right? Is that wrong?
Yeah, and then the Oklahoma win in 2009 was a big win for Pelini.
Anyway, Calvin Jones, age 54, that hit a lot of people yesterday. It did, because he played that premier position. And, we should mention, too, the Omaha Central Pipeline, Leotis Flowers, Calvin Jones,
Keith Endzone Jones, and Amon Green. So from 1986 to 1997, all but one season, 1994, an Omaha Central running back either started or played heavy carries for Nebraska.
That's remarkable. But but at the time it was remarkable.
But then you had other Omaha backs like Clinton Childs and Damon Benning and the late Ken Clark.
Yeah, Clark, Omaha South, or Omaha Bryan. My bad.
But you had when you think about what was. I mean, I asked myself this: what was different back then to develop NFL running backs in Omaha compared to now?
I don't know.
I mean, was it just a generational thing? Like we're seeing it now with basketball, with all these great basketball players. Like Stu Popsicle and I talked this week at a luncheon, and he said there are 3 Omaha natives that lead their team in scoring in power conferences:
Hunter Salas,
Chucky Hepburn, and then is it Tanji at Wisconsin?
Probably.
Yeah. Those 3 players lead their teams in scoring at power schools.
That's remarkable.
I mean, those are good programs.
Yeah, and then we saw St. Thomas,
and then you have like Fiddler. I mean,
it's St. Thomas,
and those Bellevue West and Miller North teams. They're some of the best basketball teams that have ever played in Nebraska.
Fiddler plays at Michigan State. Frankie
Correct.
Fiddler. And St. Thomas, we got a big
at USC.
Yeah, we got a big eye full of St. Thomas.
Well, and William Kyle plays for UCLA.
Yeah, apologies to anybody we're missing out. Think about all of this. It's amazing. But yeah, I'm glad we mentioned there's Calvin again. I'm glad we mentioned that Central Pipeline, which was just incredible.
And Joe McNeneman, rest in peace to Coach McNeneman. He was involved coaching a lot of those guys too, with William Reed and David Horn and Dante Grixby would be like the last Central running backs that went to Nebraska.
Oh, they were good.
Deontay,
yeah. Interesting, Sean.
All right.
Rest in peace. I'm glad we were able to talk about Calvin.
Before we go to headline 5 again, we're brought to you by our title sponsor, StayHome.Care. They're there for you and the loved ones in your life to help you with all of the simple tasks you may not be there for. Could be picking up a prescription, grocery shopping, giving a ride to a doctor's appointment, you name it. They're there for you. It's never too early to call. Visit their website at StayHome.Care or call them at 402-205-2233. Okay, as we always do, let's do odds and ends. Headline number 5, Nebraska basketball seemingly is in this hole, and it doesn't look great right now, Sip. They play Wisconsin on the road Sunday, 5 losses in a row, and now it's to the point we're not talking about making the NCAA tournament. We're worried about Nebraska not making the Big Ten tournament because the bottom 3 teams in the league don't make the conference tourney this year.
Yeah, 15 teams make it.
Of the 18, yes.
Right. Now, I'm an older gentleman. I tend, because of that, I don't panic quite as quickly as I used to do. Let's see what the game at Wisconsin looks like. Certainly Nebraska's now in a hole. I mean, they have to dig themselves out. The sport of basketball, though, there's ebbs and flows in a season. That's the way it's going to be. You can lose 4 or 5 in a row and dig yourself out. There's still time. Nebraska can, Sean, what I guess what I'm telling you is, and you're not doing this. I hear people doing it all over. Oh, they're dead. Simple. They're done. They are done. I've done that before when I was younger. And then the team goes on a 6-game winning streak and you just feel like a moron. So I'm asking you this question. Can Nebraska do that? Can they pull out of this and maybe go on at some point? It's not going to be. Listen, they play Wisconsin, then they play Illinois, then they play at Oregon. Okay, that's the issue. They play at Wisconsin, then they play Illinois, and then they play at Oregon. They got to get one of those.
Well, the connectivity of how they play has just not been there. When just the flow of what it looks like. And I was at the game as you were this week against USC. And I'll just say this, I felt like they were going to lose the whole time. It just never felt like they were playing the style of basketball they've had success with.
They were leading at halftime.
By what, 2?
By 2.
But again, it didn't feel good. It didn't have a great feel. They weren't hitting shots.
No, I know.
And they were getting out-efforted on the floor and on the 50-50 rebounds.
They were. I'm not going to push back.
When
it's true.
When you only make, 5 threes?
Yeah, they shot poorly from
5 of like 24 or something.
I think it ended up 6 of 24 maybe.
But the 3-point shooting, the on-the-floor plays that they're getting beat on, and then just the 50-50 kind of, I call them the volleyball type rebound situations where you're just tapping it around. They got beat on almost all those situations.
It's an interesting conversation to hear you say this because I was in the media area, obviously, because I got to write a game story, and they were Nebraska was leading at halftime. Then they were leading early in the second half, but all around that was the sentiment. They're going to lose this game. I'm like, they're ahead.
They should have been ahead by a lot more though, because USC was not hitting perimeter shots.
Right. No, I know.
How has Nebraska been beaten their last 4 before that? 3-pointers.
Right. Now, so here's what's we got to delve into this a little bit more. What's going wrong? Well, you mentioned offensive connectivity. I agree with you. And they don't have a third shooter. I mean, they have Bryce Williams
and a Season.
Now, who's the third?
Yeah, and you'd like to say it's Burke, but it's not.
No,
I mean, it's Juwan Gary right now.
Yeah, he's shooting about 27% from the 3-point line. Okay.
Yeah, and the Rutgers transfer, Gavin Griffin, who's, I don't know who Gage, but
right.
we haven't seen him play.
He's off in
months.
He's out of the rotation.
But he's a great shooter.
Well, he used to be.
But his his body is not big enough.
Sean, I don't know that you can call him a great shooter right now.
He was a good shooter.
Right. He's not playing. He's out of the rotation. So they don't have that. And then what's happened too is they sort of lost their edge defensively. That was what Fred was hanging his hat on with this team publicly and privately. That we're hanging our head on hanging our hat, excuse me, on gritty, tough defense. It's been okay. I mean, it's been okay in the last 5 games. It hasn't been great. So it's been there at times, but it's not been anything you can hang your hat on. So there we are. Here we are, 2-6 in the league, right? Going to Wisconsin.
All right. Well, now Nebraska on the flip side, on the women's end, 2 really good stories brewing. Number 1, Amy Williams' team is 6-2 in the Big Ten. They're ranked and they're projected to make the NCAA tournament. But then number 2, Nebraska softball ranked, and Jordy Ball, All-American level player, back. And, they've got a chance to be a host level team this year. So there is some optimism on both the women's sides for women's basketball and softball as you kind of move forward.
Amy's got that team, like you said, 6-2. It's interesting. Who's undefeated in the league? 2 teams.
USC, UCLA.
Yeah.
And that's Nebraska's 2 losses.
Yeah. I mean, those Pac-12 teams came in and flexed.
But we're watching Britt Prince. I mean, she's legit. She's gonna finish here as one of the all-time leading scorers. I mean, she's already putting up numbers as a freshman, and it's only gonna. I mean, and nobody should be surprised. I mean, our buddy Paul Riley, Brandon's dad, he's a basketball official, and he reffed her game once in like 7th or 8th grade. And he goes, Sean, I just saw the best young basketball player for a girl I've ever seen. And it was Britt Prince.
I'm very impressed. You just worked Paul Riley into a conversation.
Our buddy. And by the way, he was number 44.
Oh, Paul was?
That's what his number was.
For what did he?
Well, the Colts and UNK, I believe.
God, I guess it slipped my mind that Paul Riley played in the NFL, right?
Yeah, for the Colts.
And his son came here and
played for the Bills.
And acquitted himself very nicely.
He lived with Dykeel Shorts, by the way, Brandon Riley, in Buffalo. They were roommates for a cup of coffee.
Don't forget Brandon Riley, Nebraska fans. Bo called him White Lightning.
He was fast.
Could really run for a white guy. For anybody, excuse me.
He was one of the fastest
Yeah,
guys on the
he was-
team.
right,
It was like
he was-
Amir,
right.
Rex,
Uh-huh.
or I'm sorry, Amir, Kenny Bell, and him. They were like the three
Brian-
fastest guys in the
Brian's a
roster.
great athlete. He's a great athlete.
But yeah, big weekend. AFC, NFC title games.
I want to see the Chiefs win. I want to see the Chiefs have a put themselves. Unpopular take I have found around America right now is that you want the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I want to see them go for 3 in a row and become the first team to do it. But people seem to have some Chiefs fatigue, Sean.
Not me.
No, you're a Chiefs fan.
I've been my whole life though. I mean, it's not like, I watched a lot of 8-8 type years. I mean, where they look. I'm enjoying this. I mean,
Do you hear the Chiefs fatigue though?
It's as a sports fan, my two favorite teams and out of college athletics are the Chiefs and the Dodgers. So
God, I know you love the Dodgers.
I'm in this like generational run the Dodgers are not going anywhere for a long time. I mean,
I know you love the Dodgers. Do you hear the Chiefs fatigue?
It's just jealousy.
Okay.
And somebody actually brought up a stat that the Chiefs' opponents have actually been penalized more in the fourth quarter than the Chiefs, but you would think it's like the other way around.
I think there's been 11 straight playoff games where the opponent had more penalties than the Chiefs. Trouble. Okay. Now, that doesn't bother me that much.
Yeah, but how many are holdings on?
I don't know.
On their pass rush.
I just know this. I grew up as a Raiders fan, so I should hate the Chiefs, and there's been periods where I do. But I can't hate him with Andy Reid and Mahomes. I like those guys too.
Andy Reid is so classy.
Yeah, and so is Patrick, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah.
And here I am calling by his first name, and I've never met him. Mahomes is a classy individual.
It will be fun to go to Arrowhead in August because I would imagine Kelsey, assuming he's playing still at that point, he might retire. You never know. He played for Cincinnati.
Oh.
So you would think Kelsey's going to be pretty present down there.
Yeah, good point. Never thought about that.
And I wouldn't be surprised if Mahomes knows Dylan, and I wouldn't be surprised if Mahomes popped in there.
Yeah, it could be a lot of fun down there.
But yeah, and then Cam Jurgens maybe in the Super Bowl.
That'd be great. I didn't even mention that. I see what I want to see is a Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl. And I guess Cam would be great. That'd be great. Now, mainly what I was thinking about was Barkley. I'd like to see Barkley in this Super Bowl, Saquon Barkley. And the Sirianni story is interesting to me too, because he was under so much heat this year early and he survived it. Now I'd like to see him get to that team to the Super Bowl. I kind of admire a guy like Sirianni who can weather. He had to weather a storm in Philly for a while.
Well, and Washington is an unbelievable story.
The Washington Commanders. Oh, yeah, their quarterback is
Jaden Daniels.
Jaden Daniels he's a fascinating player to me because look now he's not little in terms of height, but he's so slight. And I don't know how he stays healthy, but he does.
There's a lot of Bears fans wondering if that's who they should have taken.
Of course they're wondering that. I mean, he's had a remarkable rookie year. One of the best, if not the best, rookie years for a quarterback in the NFL.
Because Mahomes really didn't have a rookie year because he sat out. But then Mahomes, like next year, he was incredible.
Yep. There you go. There's some odds and ends for you, Sean.
All right. Well, got a big weekend on tap. Husker basketball, though, on the road. Robin will have you covered on that. And we're just days away from the start of Nebraska baseball practice. So we'll conversate on that a little bit more as we get to the start of Husker baseball.
The Sunday tip at Wisconsin's noon.
Yeah, we've kind of lived in this Sunday noon 11 a.m. tip for the last
3 weeks.
Yeah, kind of.
I don't mind it.
We got a busy Sunday though. It's Catholic Schools Week, and we have to. My daughter Kit they have this big project like a wax museum. She did a Katie Ledecky, where she's gonna like present and talk about Katie Ledecky, the swimmer. And so we got to be at church and school, and then Carly's got basketball. So
will you be able to watch the game?
I'll be home for the Chiefs game, but I have to coach basketball Sunday.
I should just go and watch as a fly on the wall.
We're not playing Carricker's team this week, but we do play Carricker's team in a couple weeks.
That'd be Adam Carricker,
the former Husker.
Yeah.
All right.
Wrap it up.
Have a good weekend. And thanks again to Bill Moos, who was incredible for joining us on Husker Online Headlines. For Steve Sipple, I'm Sean Callahan.